Hi, my name is Johnson. I'm 40 years old and I live in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm a fashion designer and a fashion design instructor at 2 local colleges. I actually grew up here in Scottsdale, and I went to the Northern Arizona University here in Flagstaff and majored in speech communications, and then I transferred over to the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising in Los Angeles in 1994. At the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, I majored in fashion design, and I started working for a company called X Large, which was owned by Mike D of the Beastie Boys, and X Girl, that was owned by Sonic Youth. I worked there for about 3 years and moved up from basically intern to cutter to assistant designer to designer, and then eventually production manager. And that's where I got all my experience in the fashion industry that's basically led to what I'm doing today. While I was working at Extra Large, I decided that it was probably time for me to start my own clothing line. So I started a clothing line called Monkey Wench, and it started out as girls' snowboarding clothes and eventually turned into streetwear that was kind of inspired by the snow and skate industry. I started it with a soap opera actress named Christy Clark from Days of Our Lives, and she was the investor, so she basically paid for everything, and I did all the work. I did all the designing, the managing the production, the sales, the business stuff. So I got a lot more experience doing that as well. We had a pretty successful run. We actually sold internationally. We were in magazines like 17, J14. We were on celebrities like Leonardo DiCaprio. Let's see, who else? Lisa Rinna, all the soap opera actresses, Pamela Lee and Tommy. We had a lot of different celebrities wearing our stuff, which really helped us get into a lot of magazines. We had good exposure, and we did pretty well. And then eventually my grandmother passed away, and I decided that it was time to move back to Arizona and help take care of my grandfather. So when I did that, I actually found when I got to Arizona that it was going to be really tough for me to continue manufacturing Monkey Wench clothing from Arizona. When I got to Arizona, I realized that there was a lack of resources. When I was in Los Angeles, I was basically taking my clothing through the whole production process. I would literally be in downtown Los Angeles every other day, taking my patterns to the grader, taking my cuts over to get sewn, literally picking up the fabric and dropping it off, and I couldn't do that from Arizona. I wasn't gonna fly to LA every other weekend or every other day. So I eventually decided to close Monkey Wench down, which was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it had to be done. I didn't really have a choice. So I'm here in Arizona and still loving fashion and not really knowing what to do about it. And that's when I came up with the idea of doing what I do now. My current line, Angela Johnson, is basically making everything out of recycled t-shirts. So I don't need to rely on the resources that are in Los Angeles. I don't need to find wholesale fabrics. I don't need to mass produce and use all of the contractors that are there. I actually make my own patterns. I grade them myself, which means make sizes of them. I source all the fabric because I actually go to thrift stores like Goodwill and find bunches of t-shirts, and then I cut out all my pattern pieces, sew them together, and it makes each one a one of a kind. So my tagline basically is turning t-shirts into couture. I'm basically upcycling t-shirts to become garments that are really heavily constructed. It's not like your typical t-shirt where somebody cuts off a sleeve and calls it a new design. It's basically taking 25 shirts and putting them all together like a puzzle and turning them into a ball gown. And that's what my current line is now. So I'm able to basically still manufacture clothing in Arizona, but that is probably my biggest obstacle as a designer, is designing from a place without those resources. And I've actually noticed that there are other designers here that have the same problem. When I first moved back here, I met a lot of other designers that were from LA or New York, and they had to be in Arizona for one reason or another, and then had to quit their their companies or quit their jobs and couldn't find anything here because there isn't really any design industry here. And that kind of sparked something in me where I thought, why don't we all band together and sort of create a small community of fashion in Arizona, and that way we can work together and maybe possibly get jobs from each other and work with each other and help each other out. So I sort of took it upon myself to kind of start an industry in Arizona. I know it sounds really and too big for one person to do, and it kind of was, but it's kind of my personality to put 100% into something, to take on a lot, and basically nothing is too big for me, I think. So I started a directory, which was a glossy magazine at first called Label Horde, and then it eventually turned into a nonprofit called Arizona Fashion Foundation. And it was a directory that you could open up and find any local designer, any model, any hair and makeup stylist, photographer, boutique, and any resource that you actually need in the fashion industry. So I ran that for a few years and realized that it was taking up most of my time and taking away from me actually being able to work on my own clothes and design my own stuff, and eventually had to close that down. But that really put me out there in the spotlight locally and earned me a lot of coverage, media coverage, and awards. So I've been printed in probably over 200 magazines and newspapers. I've actually been published in 2 books. One of them is called Eco Fashion, and the other one is called Phoenix 21st Century City. I've won awards like the Artist of the Year Award by the Scottsdale Cultural Council. I've won the Best Local Designer by Arizona Foothills. I've won the Rising Star Award by Fashion Group International of Arizona, and a few other things here and there, and it basically ends up being free advertising for me. So it really was a lot of work that actually paid off in a great way. So I'm basically really, really busy trying to make it in the fashion industry and make something of my current line, and I do so much between teaching and sewing and volunteering and putting together fashion shows and everything locally. So on my free time, I don't have a lot of free time, but when I do have free time, the things I like to do are interior decorating. I love to decorate rooms in our house, and related to that, I like to plan parties. So whenever my kids have parties, I always throw really elaborate, fun, highly decorated parties. And usually I can pull off decorating a room or putting together a party almost free. I mean, it's pretty inexpensive because I frequent thrift stores so often for my t-shirts that while I'm there, I'll pick up knickknacks and fun things that I think would work for my house or for parties that I'm putting together. And so I always put together very unique things out of a lot of thrift store items and create everything myself. I'm very hands-on and crafty. I love to paint. In fact, sketching is one of my favorite things. So drawing fashion illustrations is like the best part of my job, and it's also what I teach at the fashion colleges. I also love to spend time with my family. I have the best family. My husband and I have been married for about 15 years now, and we have a 13-year-old boy who actually owns his own skateboard company, and we have a 5-year-old girl. My son's name is Sarkis, and my daughter's name is Tallulah, and we're all very loving and very unique family, as you can see from my family photos. So I think I would make a great contestant on Fashion Star because my clothing is really unique and different than anything that I've seen on any of those fashion TV shows out there. You asked for somebody who does something interesting with t-shirts, and that's what I do. That's really like the definition of what I do. I take t-shirts, ordinary plain t-shirts, and turn them into elaborate, fully constructed ball gowns. They're bright, they're colorful, they're fun to look at. The audience, everybody watching would probably find it really interesting, and it's unique and not something that you've had on there before. My personality, I am obviously very creative. I'm also very organized, and I try really, really hard. So I'm a little bit competitive. I mean, I put 100% into everything I do, but at the same time, I'm not cutthroat competitive. I'm not the type of person that would kind of sell somebody out or throw them under the bus, but I do everything I can to win in the most honest way. So I really want to be on this show. mostly because it would really help my current business. I think it would boost sales and get me more exposure. I've also not been in that many stores. I've been in boutiques nationwide. Right now I currently sell on my website only, and do pretty well that way. And it's actually about half of my income right now, so that's why I teach as well. But I am hoping that if I'm on this show, it would boost my sales enough to where I could make this my full-time job.